This is Gary Sheetram, and I'm joined today by Rich Minnis, who's a course leader at the National Conservation Training Center. He's joining me today to speak to us about integrating emerging technologies into adult education curriculum. Rich's experience began at Mississippi State, where he taught seated and distance learning courses in GIS and GPS prior to joining the federal government. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate being here.
What we'd like to talk about today is emerging technologies and how that applies to adult learners. Do you have a particular technology that you'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, I'm really interested in talking about how we actually deliver information through one of these online systems, because it's very different for people to receive things in front of somebody versus sitting in a computer and just hearing a voice and seeing things over the internet. So I'd like to discuss some of those issues associated with that. So one of the big issues, obviously, is, in my mind, is generational. As we have older folks, like our, middle-aged folks, I will say, coming up these days, their history has always been learning in a face-to-face scenario. So as they start to get on the computer or even our iPads or other tablets, watching things and learning in that way through an electronic system is very different to them. Even though they spend all their life watching the news at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, actually learning and working is very different for them. I think they have a little harder time grasping that and sitting down and being comfortable in that arena, versus the younger generation, that's what they're used to. So I think we have an issue. I see an issue with that as we go through. So how you deliver information then really has to be tailored in many ways depending on your audience, especially if you have an older audience or even a middle-aged audience. And a lot of the research shows keeping clips very short. And I think that's not only an issue of what we see in today's younger generation, but I think that's also a function of our older generation too. I don't think they can really deal with a long-term time period sitting down and gathering information, because I think a lot of folks are really uncomfortable using the computer still. So it's a different route is what we're looking at.
Could you possibly talk to us about a particular technology that you utilized in delivering that distance learning?
Sure. Of course, the courses I was teaching were technology oriented anyway. GIS and GPS, very technology oriented. So I'm actually starting with the aspect of teaching technology via technology. So it's kind of an interesting situation. But what I did was I used at the time, which was really kind of all that was available, basically voice over PowerPoint. I really would like to do screen capture components because this is a scenario of using programs and getting around in programs, but at the time that really wasn't available. So I was using voice over PowerPoint, trying to show the step-by-step components of getting through a system. So in many ways that was fairly clunky to be doing, to literally be pulling up a representation of a program, go to this location, etc. You made it very clunky as you were going through there, and yet to do that and keep it in short 5 to 10 minute intervals really kind of made it difficult sometimes to convey any objective to individuals. So it was one of those kind of hard to deal with situations, trying to put a single little step exercise into that time period sometimes was difficult with the technology of the time.
I appreciate you talking about some of the difficulties related to delivering that content. And we have read this week actually just about that idea of keeping clips short and chunking them literally to allow that learner to absorb it, and the other thing is having it available to go back and having accessibility to it at any point that they may need to review that. I am curious, you spoke about delivering that content, and if you'd like, could you speak to us a little bit about delivery systems, possibly what you use there at Mississippi State? And I know that at NCTC that you are going to be delivering some of these online courses as well. What are your experiences with possibly the platform to deliver the material?
Well, I've actually used several different platforms. I have been lucky or unlucky enough, depending on your opinion, to use Blackboard, WebCT, and Moodle, the freeware delivery program. And they all have benefits and negative aspects to them. But definitely, one of the things that's just inherent in there is that the people using them have to really understand how to get around in computer systems. Especially when you're teaching a course like I was, where it was heavily computer oriented anyway, you were making assumptions of students really knew how to get around. So these delivery systems, WebCT is one that I started with down at Mississippi State. They were very, for a person who understood how to get around in computer systems, they were very effective, very, very easy. You could put your videos up there and people could find them. But somebody who was less inclined to be on computers very often, afraid to go to different locations, didn't understand the concepts of going to different weeks of delivery systems or going backwards into systems, coming into tests, those types of things. So it really made it for a challenge to try to work with those folks on this type of system. You know, they really wanted to learn and they were really interested, but you almost had to have an introduction course of how to be part of the course and how to get around. And that actually kind of goes into another component. When you're actually delivering system, you're assuming people, if you're doing a class or a lecture that deals with, say, having files and saving files and moving files, you're assuming they understand what you mean by files and folders and file management. And again, I think that's another big assumption, and I think we take it for granted as we start delivering these things electronically that our students understand that. And that's, again, I think a big issue that I see, and I still see in our system is, you know, here are some practice files, just download them and use them, and they don't understand what that means or how to download them. And if they're coming down in zip files, heaven forbid, you know, they have to unzip them and put them in locations. So just the whole technology use, I think, is still a barrier that we have that we're starting to really get over, but I think we still have a lot of that in front of us.
Well, Rich, I do appreciate you speaking to us today about those the successes that you've had in delivering online training and distance learning, but also some of the challenges related to that. So I do appreciate you speaking with us today.
Again, you've been listening to Rich Menace, who is a course leader at the National Conservation Training Center in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. He was speaking to us about his experiences not only with developing online training at the training center currently, but his past experience with working with students in an online and seated capacity at Mississippi State University related to GIS and GPS training. So thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.